Hi there, this is Dennis Velco with OutBüro. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of OutBüro Voices, where we bring you interesting and lively conversations with LGBTQ entrepreneurs, professionals, and community leaders from around the world. And today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Ali Mustag. Hi, Ali. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi there, Dennis. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, absolutely. And, Ali, you are in the process of building a great consulting practice, and it's founded a lot on your college background. You as a professor, FYI, for clarity. But could you give us a little bit of a, kind of background on your kind of career journey, your professional journey, especially your academic side of life?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So basically, yes, as you noted, I am a college professor. I'm a trained sociologist. I got my Ph.D. in 2017 from the University of California, San Francisco. And originally I was trained as a fitness scholar, but basically along the way, I've also worked in other aspects of diversity and empowerment, so focusing on other marginalized communities. So what I'm doing now is I'm focusing on a book on Black women AIDS activists, specifically looking at how and why they mobilize for HIV. And so basically, I teamed up with a colleague of mine that works over in Boston. And what we did was we're basically looking at interviews of how these women basically developed their motivations around things like race, gender, and overall community survival. So basically with that, what I did was I took this knowledge that I have within ethnic studies and sociology, and I thought that this would be useful for the way that people in marketing, podcasting, and YouTube and other people that use interview methods, I thought it'd be useful for them to actually take the skills that I have and apply it in order to make the world better.
Okay, and so could you give us a little bit of an example of that?
So basically, I started getting Wolfie LLC to basically develop a business where I could help folks within these industries develop how they essentially interview their participants. So, for example, in marketing, a lot of folks use qualitative methods in order to develop insights into how their market base works. And so where I come in is I essentially you help them learn better strategies in order to develop and sort of expand upon questions about diversity within their work. So for example, if a company is looking to expand a particular market base, I could actually help give them strategies in order to do the kind of research they need in order to develop PR strategy, in order to develop advertising, branding, and other things, in order to actually get the clients that they want, in order to actually represent that in their company. Now, it's interesting because, again, like with today's sort of importance on diversity and inequality, I think there's a lot of talk where it's like, oh, well, we want it, or this is something that we find valuable, but we don't necessarily know how to do that. So I'm actually trying to give them the strategies in order to actually represent that in their work.
Okay, so it's like coaching on how to ask the right questions so that they get the answer in which they actually intend. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, essentially, it's basically how do you ask the right questions? Because normally, when it comes to things like race, diversity, and other aspects of inequality, people feel like they have to skirt around these issues. They feel like maybe they don't want to say something because they might feel it's inappropriate, or maybe they might not know much about that particular group of people. And so what I've done is I've developed a technique based off of the strategies that we use in social science. And I basically then apply that to things like market research or other forms of or even journalism.
Interesting. Well, and of course, in order to understand something, especially when you're trying to elicit an answer from others, and it might not even be in person where you can kind of clarify things like we're doing here, is it might be web-based and mass collected. So having those questions formed correctly is very important. And two, I could imagine that for someone who doesn't quite understand that target audience that they're trying to get those answers from and get that insight from, if you don't know that audience really well, you could think you're asking the right question in the right way and be completely off basis, couldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've seen several situations where a marketing firm wanted this insights company to do research on, for example, domestic workers. And so they said, oh, well, we'd like you to find out more about these domestic workers. You need to ask these people. And it turned out, when you ask them about these questions, it was like, well, no, they were the domestic workers. So, I mean, you can imagine the sort of awkward situation that would happen between the interviewer and the actual respondent in terms of like what kinds of feedback they got from the people they were interviewing. So, I mean, this is actually very important because again, it's about making people feel comfortable about things that they're not necessarily comfortable with. And the way I do it is I basically then adapt these social scientific strategies that work, that are effective, and that we researchers use all the time in order to get the information that we need from our respondents.
Okay, very interesting. And sometimes I'll be honest and a little transparent here. Is I've had conversations with people in the past, and I've kind of had the response of, "Oh, we're good. We have some gay people on our staff," or even HR people. "Oh, we're good. I'm gay." So okay, well, that doesn't mean that you have a well thought out, for example, HR recruitment strategy for the LGBT total umbrella inclusive community just because you happen to be a white gay man in the HR department. And so sometimes I think that, like I'll be honest, I myself still at my age, and as long as I've been working in the LGBT community and the LinkedIn group for 12 and a half years now, I am still learning about our community, because I don't identify as trans. I'm a cisgender, love being a guy that just happened to love other guys. I have no idea the experience of what it means to feel like a person in a different, non that it doesn't all fit right from here to here. And I myself have struggled, I guess, with my learning, or that it's been a learning. And I openly have tried to be open and honest with that. It's like, don't be hating on me because I try, give me feedback and, and then let me learn along the way. So I myself am a prime example that just because, and I'm saying this, folks, for you out there listening, that just because you're a marketing agency and just because you have an army of gay white men in your marketing agency does not mean that those gay white men will know how to ask all the questions and so forth. I mean, therefore, what I think is what I'm trying to get to is that I think it's very powerful having someone with the degree in sociology and focus that you have to come at the table, to come with that level of experience and insight and thought process.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you said that, because even me, as somebody who identifies as someone of color, just because I'm of color doesn't automatically mean I know the experiences of everybody of color. Just because I'm a minority doesn't mean I know all the experiences of other minorities. Because I think the main key here is that how can you get the most accurate data possible with what you got? And I know that most of us are not coming in from a perspective of like, oh, well, we want to go in and make somebody feel uncomfortable. No, it's just the idea that we all come from our positions in life, and this is just how it is. But the thing is that there are techniques that we can use in order to actually better the data quality or better the interview quality. And again, I mean, there might be aspects of my experience. So for example, I mean, I'm a man, so that doesn't necessarily mean that I know everything about gender. So for me, like, because I recognize that aspect of myself, I'm able to adjust my questions accordingly in order to get the feedback that I need from people who don't identify as a cisgendered man. So in that particular case, what I'm doing is I'm basically helping us not only identify our aspects of our experiences that may affect our interview quality, but I'm also giving you strategies in order to help mitigate them. And basically, again, it's the question of not necessarily wanting to do harm so much as how do you get the data that you want? And it is possible. And with the strategies that I offer, I'm able to help you be like, well, maybe I might not be this person, or maybe I might not identify with this experience, but I can probably get this anyways. But it's through the way that we sort of talk about it in the social sciences is this sort of respondent-driven attitude, where we're letting the respondents drive not only the data collection, but also the way in which they're able to tell us about the world around them. So we're mitigating essentially any uncomfortable situation that's like, oh, I didn't know that about you, or I didn't realize this. And so by doing that, we're not only being able to get the quality that we want, but we'll be able to get, basically the market base that we want in order to actually develop any sort of advertisement branding or any type of, any targeted demographic specific sort of program or policy involved. Yes.
Okay, so the quantitative data in order to help you reach your target audience better, no matter what that target audience might be.
Oh yeah,
because your approach could be used for anybody, not just the LGBT community, correct? So so any demographic. Very great.
And I'm sorry to cut you off, but there are also strategies to do this even quantitatively as well. So for those of you that are interested in quantitative research, which is the statistic and numerical side of this, I mean, there are aspects of it where we're able to then adjust the way that we form our questions and then the way that we create our regressions in order to actually get the data that we need. So it can be done qualitatively, which is the interview side, or quantitatively, which is the numbers as well.
Okay, well, very good. And so I could imagine that your type of consulting could be utilized by marketing departments of companies, but then also marketing agencies who then consult with those, larger brands. Mm-hmm. So very, very good. Well, I'm happen to be having a few conversations over the coming weeks with a few marketing agencies who are LGBTQ focused. So I will be sure to hopefully have this edited up and out and be able to point to it for them to become aware of you. Oh. So you also mentioned that. So I hear how this is. What you're doing is focused on just that, the marketer in the brand. It's Coca-Cola trying to reach more transgender people in Latin America or something to that nature, mm-hmm. or marketing agencies. But you also, when we first started out, mentioned YouTube. And of course, this is a interview, and I've started doing these interviews about three and a half months ago. And so how you mentioned that this is also for YouTubers and interviewers like that. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh yeah, thanks so much for bringing that up, because, I think that when we're, I think right now when we're trying to get diversity, I think, the way that we change culture and then the way that we actually are able to create the change that a lot of us want to see, is basically refocusing and readjusting our strategies to an approach that's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach, but rather a multifaceted, multi-targeted approach where we're able to represent the groups in the ways they would like to be represented. So the way I see this is that my strategies that I've developed for market research can also be applied to those in the YouTube, podcasting, and other journalism fields. Simply because, again, like they're also getting data, they're also getting interviews and respondents. But the question is, how do they get this data? How do they get these respondents? And ultimately, how do they get the stories that'll end up going out there and sort of shaping the way all of us sort of live our lives? I mean, a lot of us listen to podcasts when we're on their commute to work. Well, or maybe a couple of minutes after work, given coronavirus. But the idea is that like we all listen to these things. And because we're so heavily relying on things like YouTube and podcasting as new forms of media, again, like they're also starting to represent the stories that we want to hear about, especially post the George Floyd era, where a lot of us were shocked that, you know, these kinds of things would happen. So I think that given this sort of climate and this sort of context, we're able to then use the strategies that I developed in order to help represent these stories. So these things come off as like, yeah, I mean, these things are happening and they're happening right under our noses. So not only do I develop an actual strategy on how to get those stories, but I also take the course even further in order to actually talk about the ways in which we get people to talk to us. How is it that we quote unquote do our research? How is it that we then use this information in the way that we then develop the way that we talk to the people that we're interviewing and the way that we're getting them onto our platform? So I think that, like, you know, by doing this, we're able to not only better our data or better our quality of what we do, but we're also able to change the world because, again, we're getting access to those stories.
Absolutely. That's the reason why I've started these. I just, you know, there's never enough content, in my opinion, when it comes to the entrepreneurial and professional side of the LGBT community, because most LGBT media, you know, no offense to anyone out there, but, you know, 99% of the LGBTQ media is, you know, entertainment and what I'd call, you know, hot guy, good looking girl, clickable content, versus substantive content, in my own, you know, personal opinion. So I'm striving for the more substantive, you know, conversations and more, and, you know, like this in a casual, you know, as you can attest, we had a brief, you know, get to know you just so we could kind of frame things, know what we're chatting about, but there was no script. There was no really even bullet points. It's more like we're sitting down for coffee and just letting the conversations go organically. Mm-hmm. So I guess with that, and don't know if you've had the opportunity to watch or listen to a couple of the past shows, but, you know, with your formula, is there any tips that you could provide me to help me grow and become better and represent our community better? On putting you on the spot.
Yeah, you know, I think that the best way to do that is to really focus on your respondent. So for anybody doing your kind of line of work, I would say to really let them drive the conversation, as similar to what you've done. So for example, the idea that you're asking them for their stories, you're asking them to talk about themselves, rather than going, well, okay, so like, you're brown, so like, how does this affect this, or something like that, where I mean, I've seen that question happen countless times when I've done press. So for example, when I've done interviews in the past, and when I've done certain press for major outlets, I mean, you get the questions like, okay, so this is your background, what is it like? And it's like, well, wait a second though, like I didn't share my background, just like you asked me for my background. Whereas, you know, somebody else would just assume like that's just what you are. Like, so this is just, you know, what is the answer. That then puts me on the spot. So the way I would then remedy that is to start that with that approach, which is to actually let them talk about the way they're experiencing things, and then develop probes in order to then use what the respondent has said in order to then drive the conversation forward and to get them to actually talk.
Wow, thank you. You just basically said, I'm doing a good job, because I'm doing exactly what you're saying to do. Thank you. And it may sound a little bit formula, but I do. I have the basic intro. I ask the basic question. Tell me about you, your basic background, and so forth, and then from there, kind of go on. And we have that first little intro call just so that I could frame questions. Because I've even had guests who, even though we've talked about something in our first introduction call, if we hadn't already known each other a while, kind of, in the moment, kind of forget that in their dialogue of talking to, telling them about themselves, they forgot to mention something that they had mentioned before. And so then I get to be able to, oh, well, you know what? When we first spoke, you mentioned this. And they go, oh, yeah. And so that's why I have that brief, intro chat. Because sometimes I would love to just do the interview, but in doing that, I also want to make sure it's the best experience for both you, for me, and the audience in viewing and listening.
Absolutely. And then from that strategy, you can then build into more concrete examples and asking for that. And then by doing that, you're able to then actually create this sort of story about the other person. So just as, for example, you did a really great job, like basically asking me these broad questions, then what you could do on top of it is then add like the story layer and give the concrete examples, because that's essentially what if you're in the journalism field, like that's essentially what your viewers are looking for. Are you getting that rich narrative and that rich story? And then not only that, but then if you're looking at specific marketing techniques, then you're actually then getting not only that story, but then you're like, oh, well, this is the image of, going to the temple, and like this is sort of what this community sort of does. And so you can then develop an advertising strategy around that. So then that way, maybe you develop an ad with like a mom and a dad and a child going to their temple, and maybe they're getting, maybe they're listening to a sermon or something like that. And at that point, like what you're doing is you're making it clear that you understand your audience. And by doing that, you're actually then making that connection between you and then the audience.
Okay. I understand. And, lately too, we didn't talk about this. So again, throwing something at you off the cuff here. But, I'm in dialogue with companies, and it's a lot about employer branding. And of course, in the LGBT community, we are probably very unique. Maybe women and people of color are starting to pay more attention to who they do business with and who they purchase from and so forth more. But for a while now, the LGBTQ community in particular is, as a company does both internally with their employees and the consumers, the LGBT person pays more attention to that. So as a consumer, an LGBT person would be more apt to, before they make a major purchase or get into a long-term contract, even if it's, $100 a month, like a cell phone company, they'll more apt to go out and do a little bit of research, look at a few reports, hopefully here in the future, start looking at OutBüro.com for that insight into an employer who is also a brand. So, I imagine your types of marketing could also be useful in all facets of understanding your target audience, because it's not just the consumer necessarily as a large employer. You're also targeting employees, and so in today's world, you're wanting to hopefully target the female, folks. You're wanting to target people of color and different ethnic backgrounds, and you're wanting to target the U.S. veteran. You're wanting to target, the LGBT community. So so in your approach and in your construct, do you see any difference in that, and how your methodology could be utilized toward employer branding? That is where the employer is striving to reach a
Mhm.
particular demographic for employment versus the consumer? Is it the same? Do you see maybe tweaks? Any thoughts spontaneously about that?
Absolutely. I think that my method could actually help, especially like, not only improving sort of company advertising, but also within a company within the company diversity issue. So both intra-company and inter-company dynamics, because again, like by being able to master these strategies, you'll be able to not only understand their experiences within a company, so you could not to improve, you could also improve within company relations, but also you can also then improve a company's image by basically asking people like, hey, like what are you like what do you want to see from this company? What kind of imagery do you want to see in order to basically make that company more reputable to that one particular demographic? So for example, I mean, I was actually just buying a car, in the process of buying a car. And it was interesting because when I walked into a car dealership, I noticed that none of the employees were wearing masks.
Oh,
And that was something that was really troubling for me. So I mean, right there I noticed like, wow, like maybe their values and my values there might be a disconnect between that. So I mean, long story short, I mean, there were certain things where eventually a salesperson actually called us disrespectful for asking if something came with the car. But like, it was interesting because like that first image when I walked into the dealership was the fact that nobody wore a mask. So again, like if the company had done that aspect of research where it's like, well, like maybe this might, turn off certain customers, they might have had a better relationship with me and their consumer.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, just thinking of the health risks and so forth, you know, I know where this will soon be out, but look at the person who's been touting don't wear masks and everything else, and look where he is, if that's real and not just fake news. But very interesting. So yeah. So as you were speaking, I was also thinking how. So really, what I'm hearing you say is your methodology is: do you want to ask questions, and do you want to get the best answer the first time, no matter what you're doing? So it's how do you approach asking questions for whatever purpose that might be? Is that a fair
Yeah,
statement?
absolutely. It's 100%. And I think that, for any industry that needs and if any information that needs information from a particular group of people, this method is for you, essentially. May it be qualitative, which is through the interview process, or that you sort of just mentioned to me the idea of the quantitative aspect, because I am also trained as a demographer too, a master's in demography. So again, like these methods can be applied either qualitatively or quantitatively.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, I heard you make a comment of your course. So is
Mhm,
that like a course about how to do this, your methodology? Is that a course
mhm.
online? Is it, tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I've been a sociology professor for the last 10 years, and right now I'm actually doing a postdoc remotely through a Canadian institution. So I've been working with Canada on a bunch of research projects. But basically, I've also taught research methods to undergrads for several years. And basically, I took the main ideas of this research methods course, and I basically then created a course friendly for people in the market research world, in the YouTube world, or in the journalism world at large. And basically with that, I'm able to then help individuals get this information that they need without this, without the theory and without all that kind of stuff. But it's essentially to pare down the information so that it's useful, it's time efficient, and it's practical.
Okay. And so is that like a self-guided online course, or is that, kind of like some instructional videos, or what's the
Yeah.
delivery method for your course and
So
the
right
duration?
Oh, okay. So right now I'm in the pre-sale phase where I'm essentially working with clients and companies individually, to where I essentially do a portion of the in a portion of the course for like about, and I use that for an hour. And then what we do is I basically ask for feedback within 15 minutes after that hour. And so hence doing my own R&D, right? But then from that, though, I take that information, I'm using that to build a master class around this information so that it's targeted specifically for the marketing community, targeted specifically for the journalism community. And I do that through a larger sort of instructional video style course, which basically those that engage in the pre-sale would have access to for free if they were to go to the pre-sale, if they were to get the pre-sale initially. However, yes, this is part of a larger, so basically the pre-sale right now that I'm doing is part of the larger course. So you're getting a portion of it for a reduced price, and with that price, you'll be then able to get the larger course for free if you take the pre-sale deal. However, if you don't get the pre-sale deal, then the workshop will be up online and it will then be full price. But then, yeah.
So your pre-sale deal, the deal is you're asking for feedback to further hone it, and then it'll be reinforced, reiterated, and hammered home when they then, for participating and giving that feedback, get the full completed course.
Indeed. Yes.
Awesome.
And it'll also be expanded as well. So not only would you be getting topics that I didn't cover in the pre-sale before, but you'd also be getting more topics as well. So you're actually getting, so I'll go into detail about things like how do you then code your data? Like how do you then go through the coding process and look with this diversity in mind? Or how do you then create the patterns and the things that you want to see from a perspective where you're looking at different voices and the sort of patterns that emerge when you're doing that. So there's a whole bunch of things that the clients will be getting with this service. In addition, I'm also offering personal and private consulting services as well.
Okay, well, wonderful. And is there a website where one would go to sign up for this?
Absolutely. It's www.gettingwolfie.com. That is GETTINGWOLFIE.com.
Getting Wolfie. Okay. Good for the gay community. Woof. All right. The wrong spelling, right? WOOF is that one, but you know. Well, wonderful. That sounds very, very exciting. And, you know, is there, just out of curiosity, is there any, you know, kind of like research or studies or reports or something that, you know, from this that you are looking to, you know, achieve or, you know, come out of it?
That'd be interesting. I mean, right now,
just out of curiosity,
that's interesting. So right now, I mean, I have a publishing record where I have done peer-reviewed research, and as you know, I'm putting out the book on the Black women AIDS activists, and I'm also doing several papers with a research firm. But that would be interesting to then start to do a larger report about the needs that marketing folks and people that are involving themselves in PR or journalism or YouTube or podcast might need. So then that way it can help better those specific industries from this particular course.
Well, and nothing like creating research that also helps sell your product, right?
That's interesting, yeah.
So, well, studies. I love to write about studies. Mm-hmm. Several of the first articles of the like 170 or 180 articles that I've written on OutBüro.com, many of the initial ones that have become my kind of cornerstone articles. It's not that I wrote those studies, but I found the studies because they had related to, you know, LGBT issues, you know, like LGBT discrimination in the workplace and so forth. And so I love reading about studies, you know, to me. It's not, you know, sometimes you can say whether how much of it is correct or skewed or whatever, but, you know, it's more quantitative, it's something of substance. And for me, I find that, you know, so, you know, again, I found there were about 6 or 7 or so studies that I've written about. And then again, I reference them a lot in my other articles. I can point to that. And so just FYI, if you ever come out with a
Awesome.
study about it, make sure I'm aware of it so I can write a little article of my take on it and be able to reference it over and over and over again.
That's a wonderful idea. Yeah. And I think that it's important because again, like it'll tell you like who did you sample, aka who did you talk to find what your results are. You know, how did you sample them? How did you find them? Like how did you develop your hypotheses? On what basis did you do that? So again, like quantitatively, it's very important to do this as well as qualitatively. So again, in both cases, I think that that would be a really interesting angle to go off on the study direction, which would be amazing. And that'd be awesome.
And just this is also stuff that I do as I just think out loud is something additionally, if you haven't thought about this, is some level of maybe certification. That you took this course, and therefore this person is now certified in this methodology. For an example, one of my calls later this week is with one of the oldest LGBTQ marketing agencies in the country, if not the world. And they're about to release a study. And, I know they've been doing marketing for a really long time, but, that would be interesting to go, to just as an idea to reach out to the marketing agencies that are known in the industry. They're not hard to find. And, offer your course and to have them certified. And then every study that they do have your little certification, on it. Wouldn't that be cool?
Dare to dream. Yeah, there's also the quantitative aspect of my training, and that's why I was like, oh yeah, you're right. That was something I could think about too. Yeah, you're just a great ideas person. It's just amazing.
That's part of what I don't know. Things hit me, and I share them. There's almost every single person I chat with, I end up giving them a business idea, and they're like, "Oh wow, let's write that one down." Well, Ali, that sounds like a really great project. And just out of curiosity, how long have you kind of been forming, this concept and working on it, and getting it ready for prime time?
Well, basically what happened was, so as you know, I'm a associate professor, and I thought, it's great and all teaching this to undergrads, but I feel like, these skills would be really, really useful for people within these industries. So I thought around maybe April or May that, maybe it's time to start expanding out, and maybe it's time to start reaching people that can actually make change in the world. And so what I did was I thought, okay, so let's think about things like marketing or things about how the media is shaped, and maybe I could use my skills in a way to actually then address some of their needs. So what I did was I then developed the concept of Getting Wolfie. And that's sort of a brand that I've been building for a while as I've been doing a lot of work in diversity and in empowerment for marginalized people. And I thought maybe, like just maybe, I should form a business around it. And so that aspect sort of solidified around June. And
Wow.
so then I decided to go full force and start to actually then take this to another level, which is the level we're seeing today.
Okay. So this is the Wolfie approach.
Indeed.
Well, it's also, if you've not yet investigated this, many associations, professional associations have continuing educational credits where so if you've not looked into it, I don't know off the top of my head if any of the marketing associations or if there's certifications for marketers. But this could be something, once fully fleshed out, you could approach those, if there are any certifying organizations in those industries who have a continuing educational component, that yours could become part of the offerings of fulfilling continuing educational units for that particular maintenance of that association level. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like I know attorneys have continuing legal education, realtors, CPAs, and so forth. So just as one more thought, as a way to have it almost become a necessity. right? Or an option within a necessity. That's great.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that especially now, like in our sort of world where like we're seeing that the impact of a college degree is having less sway as it did before, I think
So
that these
true.
courses are even more important because they're getting the information they need at a fraction of what they would pay for a bachelor's degree or a master's degree.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that someone, because someone got a degree 20 years ago or 15 or even 10 years ago, doesn't mean that they received this kind of information and, today, timely and in a concise, compact manner. So
Mhm.
I think it's spot on. So awesome that you had the idea and focused. And what's so great is, whether it can be adapted or expanded, just think of this as your first in a series of potential tools like this. So, well, very, very interesting, very interesting. I know as I go forward, I'll make sure that there'll be particular people that I will point on to this dialogue and point them to your site because they are in the marketing industry. So be
Thank
sure
you.
to do that.
Thank you.
Well,
And I think what my program also offers, in addition to the information, is also the accessibility. Because I mean, so many people have such busy schedules and they're so tired. And like, it's like, when are you going to find the time to do this? So even in the pre-sale that I'm doing, I mean, it's based on the other person's schedule. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm going through the material with them when they'd like to. And then even then with the online instructional format where it's videoed, again, they're able to access it at a time that actually fits their busy schedule. I mean, I know that if you're working, like to say, like 7 8 hour days, like it's hard to like focus on, improving your skill set. So I think that like when, it's being offered in a way that's digestible, clear, and also at a time that it works for them, I think that basically, it's definitely something that could help improve their skill set at a time that's most convenient for them. In addition, there's also the issue of being able to ask questions. So lots of people have had these questions and concerns, but they've never been able to ask. And so even in the pre-sale, since it's live, I mean, I answer their questions on that forum. So I mean, basically, I'm able to not only retool the information for them at a time that's convenient for them, but I also then specifically tailor that particular presentation for them. So they're getting the information they need, and then that they can actually find useful and apply right away.
awesome. Well, very good. Well, I'm also having a conversation with the Gay Marketing Association founder here, likely this week too. So I'll make sure that he's aware of this. And so for yourself, consider joining some groups or starting a group on outbureau.com for this topic. If your own website, just like anyone out there, if your business or your industry does not have an LGBT focused community group, feel free to start that. To join outbureau.com at outburo.com is free. Costs only come in for businesses that would like to have ratings and feedback and advertise and all the great search engine love optimization that can provide. But for the average, call it 95+% of everyone out there, OutBureau is here for you as a service. And there are the groups. So groups can be public, where anyone can join and or see the content of that group in a public manner. And private groups are just where people need to request to join and be approved, and then only people within that group can see the content. So it's a great way to have a course or something and have a collaboration, be able to send information, share documents, and so forth. It it does not have like live streaming and so forth on it, but you can share videos that are already pre-made. And then there's secret groups. So only people who are invited to those groups and accept those invitations know about them, see them, and so forth. So just something to think about if you would like to take use of that. Would love to have everyone join outbureau.com and create your group today and invite everyone in your industry, your local community, or those that you work with or deal with. Groups can be of almost anything, similar to like groups on Facebook or groups on LinkedIn, but a lot more interesting information. And as I like to share with people, OutBureau does not track your every move like some of those other creepy organizations. So, well, Ali, we've had such a great conversation. It's been so good learning about what you're doing. Again, my brain, I already know between 6 to 8 people that I want to make aware of just off the top of my head of what you're doing. So hopefully you'll get some people signing up for your current phase. They would be great people for that kind of feedback you're looking for. Is there anything else before we sign off that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think that the more that we think about diversity, diversity is that the thing is that a lot of us think that it's challenging, but really I'm here to make sure that it really isn't. And it's just a matter of being able to ask the right questions. Yeah, and I think that this is something that can be accessed by anybody. Like, you don't have to be, somebody who's of color, trans, or being other gendered minorities in order to understand their experiences, but it's just being able to figure out ways to get that information. And I think that in my program, I'm able to help others get the information they need in order to basically better their work quality and ultimately, to make a profit. So
There you go.
The name of the game is, because this is becoming an increasing market share, where again, like marketing, advertising, and branding is sort of going into this direction. These questions are now crucial. And obviously not everybody has time to take an ethnic studies course or a women's studies course or a sexuality studies course. So why not just have it presented to you on a silver platter?
I hear you. Absolutely. Well, wonderful, Ali. So much again, appreciate our time today and look forward to sharing this with the OutBureau community and beyond.
Thank you very much for having me.
Wonderful. We'll have the links to your website at getwolfie.com in the show notes and in the show notes on outbureau.com, as well as in the description on YouTube and all of the podcasting apps, which include Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, and about 10 others. So make sure you check out outbureau.com today. If you are listening to this or even watching it directly on YouTube, be sure to, you can also find it on outbureau.com if you click the episodes page. And of course, check out all of our articles, register on outbureau.com for free, and join the community. So this is Dennis Velco with OutBureau.com. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.